Hi, I'm Jacqueline.
And I'm Courtney, and this is Caffeinated Crimes.
I love when Courtney surprises me with the record button. She's just like, nope, we're going now, and good luck. And then
I got my
mid-sentence.
burp out, and then I was going forward.
She's like, I'm good. Hope you are. Here we go. Um, Also, I have something to confess that I did not realize until this moment. That I've not read the notes for this episode in the slide.
I even finished it on Sunday to give you an extra 2 days.
I don't know what happened. Yeah, I was gonna read them at some point. Yesterday I started a new book, so I just like got sucked into that and didn't think about it. And then today work was crazy. I actually was busy and worked all day, and then I went to an event tonight that I worked, and then I got home at like 8:15, and then I shoved dinner in my face, and then because on my way home I thought about it and I was like, "Oh, I'm gonna read it while I'm eating dinner." And then Andrew
Mhm.
was talking to me, and then I forgot about it, and then we sat down and talked, and then literally as I started saying my name, I was like, "I don't know what this episode's about." So
Do we need to make it an espresso?
no, we got this. I'm gonna
Okay.
nail this. I'm gonna
All
impress
right. I
myself.
think this is the first time that's ever happened where one of us
I
legit
think
has
it
not
is
read the
too.
notes. And why are you doing this when I'm editing? This
Okay,
is
so how about this? So if it does not go well, then you can send me the file and I'll edit it. And if it
okay.
does go
Okay.
well, then you can edit
There we
it.
go. There we go. We'll figure it out. I mean, we both have to edit this week anyway, so
Exactly. It'll be fine. Or I'll get
it'll
a
be fine.
paragraph in and she's gonna be like, "Would you please shut up? I'm gonna tell this story."
I think you'll be good. You'll be good. You're
Yeah,
just gonna practice like you're a news anchor, where you're just like
that's
reading it
true.
like on the spot.
That's true. We're gonna
Hmm.
test out our skills. We've been doing this 4 years now, recording, because we recorded our first episodes in
Yeah.
like February. So 4 years we've been doing this. I got this. I got
Yeah.
this.
And I mean,
I
even when
hope.
we like even when I research and write the entire episode, I still fuck up.
Yeah,
So
same.
and even
Same.
when I read over the notes, I still fuck up. So
So maybe this will be the way to do it from now on. We'll see. I don't know. Oh, geez. I'm really sorry to you, Courtney, and to these listeners.
I I think it's gonna be a choose your own adventure. I'll
Yeah.
just
I also, like I said, I love that I thought about it on the way home of like, okay, great. I'm going to eat my dinner. I got enough time to eat and read my notes and then just, well, also, so I got home. Okay. I'm so sorry. Let me tell 18 stories at once, like I do. Last week we mentioned to you guys that we were in this wonderful snowstorm. It was quite the snowstorm, guys. Like it was
Mhm.
very early on last week. Today I left my house for the first time in like 9 days, I think. Because I live at the top of a hill and it's been solid ice. So
Mhm.
where was I going with the story? So I got home tonight from the event that I was working, and I was like, I need to put my trash cans up to the curb because it hasn't been collected in 2 weeks because they didn't collect at all last week. So of course it's now twice as heavy as it normally is, and I live on a very steep hill, so I'm like lugging this heavy trash can all the way up the hill that's very icy. It was quite a workout. So I think once I did that, my brain just forgot that there was anything else I needed to do
Yeah.
tonight. You know, that's
I
how it
mean,
goes.
maybe it's good for you that you'll only have to read this as you go, because this one is just really sad
Oh, geez. Okay, well, at least
and
I'll only
really
have to read it once
depressing.
then. So that is a
Yeah,
positive.
it's really sad. So,
Great. Okay, so before we get into the sad though, we do want to shout out our newest Patreon subscriber. I don't know what they're called. This lovely human being who joined our Patreon. So thank you so much, Julie, for joining. We really appreciate you. We are happy to have you here. We hope you're enjoying all of that bonus content. And if you want to be like Julie and join our
mhm.
Patreon, it is patreon.com/caffeinated crimes, where this week you are getting your 41st bonus episode, a little 2023 recap of all the major stuff that happened last year, and all those other episodes that you can check out. You can get a pin, you can get a sticker, you can chat with us in the Discord. We got lots of stuff going on. So come be like
Mhm.
Julie and join us.
Yes, be like Julie and join us.
Thank you, Julie.
Yes, and we do only have one update this week. And we did see that Scott Peterson, I was like, is it Peterson or Patterson? I almost forgot. Scott
Who is this
Peterson's
person?
case. Well, there's also, I think the staircase is Michael Patter, or is he Peterson too?
I don't
Anyway, it does
know.
not matter. It doesn't matter. Scott Peterson. that man. The Innocence Project has actually picked up his case. So
Yeah.
that'll be very interesting to see what they find, what they discover. That's a very hotly debated case.
Yeah.
And that was one of our first episodes that we ever
Hmm.
did. So yeah,
I kind
interesting to
of
see where
wonder,
that'll go.
yeah, definitely. I kind of wonder like if there's stuff that they know that like the public doesn't know yet for like, because I feel like they usually only take like fairly strong cases. You know what I mean? Like I don't think they usually take cases that are like questionable in any way.
I feel like the issue with this one is I feel like if I remember correctly, there wasn't that much hard evidence. It was a lot of like
Yeah, there
circumstantial evidence. So I wonder if it's
exactly.
like, I feel like the Innocence Project, like he might not be innocent, but he might not have had enough to be convicted, you know?
Yeah, true, true.
So
I
I
mean that's what
wonder
we
if
said
it's
all
that.
along. Like we don't know if
Hmm.
he's actually guilty or not, but we don't think there's enough evidence to find him guilty in the court of law. So yeah, it could just be
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. I guess we'll see.
Yeah, stay tuned.
Yeah. All right. We're going to go ahead and get into this one. Our sources were the Lost Women of Highway 20 documentary. Was a great documentary. If you guys want to go, it was a 3 episode. It was very good. The Hill and the Oregonian, they had like a series also called Ghost of Highway 20. So many women went missing or were found murdered along Highway 20 in Oregon. And when Rachanda Pickle went missing in 1990, it helped show how one man may have been responsible all along. So Highway 20 runs from Boston, Massachusetts to Newport, Oregon, and it's actually the longest road in the United States and runs through 12 states.
Wow,
So,
that's very interesting.
yeah, never would have guessed that one to be the longest. But it is 3,365 miles long. And if you drove it straight, it would probably take like a week because, like, if you there, I mean, there's no way you could get in your car and go straight. But if you did, it would take 52 to 60 hours, like just straight
Wow.
driving time, like no
Yeah.
stopping, anything. So on July 11th, 1990, 13-year-old Rachanda Leah Pickle disappeared from her home. She lived at Santiam Junction, where Highway 22 and Highway 20 met. So this was like a little compound with like 5 or 6 houses, like in the middle of nowhere. It's like you're driving down a road and you see like a little clump of houses, and then there's nothing else there. Um, and they were actually about 25 miles from the nearest town. So they actually had to go to like a certain spot to get like bussed into a different town to go to school. Like there's not
Oh
even a
wow.
school in this area.
Hmm.
So she did have a brother named Byron, and her mother, Linda, had married Steve Pickle and had both of them. So Linda and Steve didn't really get along very well. They fought often. They would use like the kids as pawns in their fights. Not a good couple. Basically, didn't really work out, and they did end up getting divorced. After that, Steve didn't really come around as much, and Linda really struggled trying to survive on one income. So Linda eventually started dating John Aykroyd. He was a mechanic, and they got married in the mid 1980s. And when Rashanda was around 6 is when they decided to move to the Junction, which is where John Aykroyd lived. So, Rachanda was very much into the latest fashion and pop music. Byron said he would definitely call her like a diva. Like, she was funny and goofy, and she had a presence about her, and she just loved staying up to date with all like the latest stuff that was going on, like, especially like in the 90s, there's all the different like hairstyles and outfits, and like she loved all of it.
Hmm.
And in 1990, Rachanda and Byron got to spend time with Steve and try to get to know him. So Rachanda had actually gotten into a fight with Steve and decided to go home. Like they were supposed to spend like the whole summer basically with him. And then he, they got into a fight because she wanted to go somewhere and he was just saying very mean things to her. And she was like, you know what? I'm done. I don't have to be here. I don't have to stay
Yeah.
here. But Byron did decide to stay with Steve. And so Byron was actually with his father when Linda called him about Rachanda missing. So they contacted all of Rachanda's friends. No one really believed she ran away, like, especially not alone. And like where she lived was so remote, it's not like she could easily run away. So they kind of traced back the following day. So on July 10th, John and Linda had gone to work and only Rachanda would be home. So Linda asked her to do some chores around the house. John, picked up Linda once she got off work and Rachanda was not home. So they started to get like really concerned. So on July 10th, Rachanda's mom, Linda, reached out to Byron and wondered if he'd heard from her. So Byron was trying to think of like all the places she could be. And he knew that she wouldn't go into the woods alone because she was just really scared of them. They were really intimidating. Again, this is just little compound in the middle, just surrounded by woods. And he was like, there's no way she would have gone by herself into these woods. So Linda thought she had to wait 24 hours to report her missing, and so she didn't call until July 11th. And the 911 operator did kind of give her like major attitude about not calling sooner, which I was like, but if she did call, you probably would have.
Exactly. Like that's so frustrating because when you do call immediately, they're like, "Oh, your kid's been missing for an hour. Like, call us back tomorrow. She's not home." Like that's the
Mhm.
response you always get. Like,
And they like
ugh.
played another 911 call where they were like, my daughter's missing. And he was like, oh, what? You mean like a runaway? So it was like
Hmm.
weird, the reactions, like, oh, what, a runaway? And then this other operator is like, that's not true at all for children. Like, why would you wait? Are you not concerned or whatever? And it's like,
Oh my gosh, you can't win. Like
yeah,
you literally can't
that's
win.
truly what it is.
And like I don't blame her for thinking it's like I mean a lot of people still think that's like oh you can't report them
Mm-hmm.
missing until 24 hours. Like a lot of police departments will still tell you that and you have to like argue and say like no that is not a law.
Mm-hmm.
So like I don't blame her for thinking that that's true though.
Yeah. So all of Chanda's stuff was still in her room. So if she ran away, like she probably would have taken like some of her makeup, some personal items. People don't really typically run away with just the clothes on their back. So search and rescue teams from 7 different counties were gathering together to do a 50-mile search, and a lot of volunteers showed up as well. So John tried to help like the volunteers to figure out where to go. John grew up here, lived here. He knew these woods very, very well. And Linda was convinced Rachanda had been kidnapped. Like she doesn't think she just walked away. She did think something like that had happened to her. And whenever people in the area heard about Rachanda missing, it kind of reminded them of another woman who went missing 12 years earlier. So Camp Sherman is 20 miles east of the junction, and Camp Sherman is a vacation resort community. There's only one store in the whole place. So it's kind of a gathering point for people, and it was owned by Gary and Chrissy Weston. So they kind of knew everyone, like people coming in the vacation, they kind of saw everyone because it was the only place you could kind of go for anything you needed at that point. So on Christmas Eve morning in 1978, Kaye Turner was vacationing in Camp Sherman, Oregon. She was from Eugene, Oregon, and so she went for a hike down the road and never returned. And Gary and Chrissy, the owners, decided to help her husband Noel, like looking for her because he was kind of like came to the store and was like, I can't find my wife. I don't know. I'm not from here. I don't know where she is. So they kind of went driving around and expected to find her with like a sprained ankle or just gotten lost, something like that. So they did call the authorities about her missing, and there was no law enforcement in Camp Sherman at the time because there was so little crime. And they were able to get a few locals around and start searching, and the search continued on into the next day. So a lot of law enforcement really believed Noel could have killed her and dumped her body. I mean, husband's always the first suspect.
Yeah.
So they're kind of like side-eyeing Noel a little bit. And they heard rumors that like that their marriage wasn't doing so well. And so law enforcement really spent more time like questioning Noel than actually participating in the searches because they're like, we'll just get him to crack, confess, and then we won't even have to worry about searching these woods. Um, so Kay and Noel met in college and they both graduated in 1966 and decided to get married. That's when they moved to Eugene, Oregon. So Kay became the interim director of Planned Parenthood in Eugene, and she was independent and a feminist, and she'd gotten really into running. And they were kind of saying like this time was kind of when running started to like take off, like become a thing people do more
Hmm.
so. Um, so she was really into running marathons and races. Noel said they were both kind of independent, and there were definitely times they could have communicated better. He was like, we kind of lived our own lives. Like, we obviously could have been better, but we weren't perfect. In her office, they did find a calendar that showed Kaye did have relationships outside of her marriage, but this was a surprise to Noel. He didn't know she was having an affair. He knew she was unhappy, but not like she was seeing other people. And eventually, Noel was cleared as a suspect. So they spent all this time trying to get him to confess, and he had nothing to do with it.
Hmm.
So they had no suspects and no clue about what happened to Kaye. So months passed with no news. And then in August 1979, a man came into the store in Camp Sherman and wanted to use the phones. He said he'd found some clothing in the woods. He said he was rabbit hunting with his dog and found some clothes. And this was kind of a red flag to Gary, who's the shop owner, because he was like, there's not really rabbits in this area. Like, we don't Camp Sherman's not known for its rabbit population. Um,
Yeah.
so the man said he found a pair of shorts, a shirt, and a sweatshirt. So Gary called state police, and the man was really hoping he'd get a reward for reporting this because Kay's family like had just said there was like a reward for any information. And the man told Chrissy that he was the last person to see Kaye Turner alive, and he was like, "Oh, isn't this crazy? Like I found her clothes. I'm the last one to see her alive." So they called the police again, and they sent more police after this detail. And Gary Weston didn't realize it at the time, but this man was John Aykroyd, is the one who's finding her clothes.
Hmm. Hmm.
And John had said specifically, "Why did I have to find her? I was the last one to see her alive." Like those were his exact words. So sus. Um, John took Gary to where he found the clothes, and the clothes appeared to be like on top of pine needles. So investigators really believe these items have been placed there. Like it's been 8 months, so they don't think like nothing in the woods had fallen on them since. Like there's no way that could have
No,
happened.
no.
So they found like a scrap from her blue pullover, her underwear, and remnants of the heel of one of her Nikes. And they found the other shoe that was still mostly intact. They also found her watch. Something had caused it to stop, and it said like December 24th at 9:27 a.m. So again, the day she went missing. They did find some of her hair, and they also eventually found a lower jawbone and a couple of bones, and they were confirmed to be Kaye Turner's. So police had spoken to John Aykroyd 8 months earlier, and when they were searching for Kaye, they started to look for potential suspects, and John's name came up quickly because he'd been seen by another state highway worker who knew John from work. Um, so John said he did see her, and he was interviewed on January 11th, but like they only really treated him as a witness. Like they weren't like acting like he was a suspect. They were like, oh, maybe this guy knows information, not he could have done it, basically.
Hmm.
And John was just kind of a local boy that people knew. So I guess they were like, oh, yeah, like this guy couldn't have done anything. And again, like the 8 months after she disappeared, her friends had put up $1,000 reward. And then suddenly he's claiming to have found the clothing in the woods. Weird, sus. So after John finds her clothing, his story starts to shift. And he did fail a polygraph, which we know isn't always 100%, but still can be a little bit telling. So they interview him again, and he says he did speak with her and had a brief conversation. He said it was cordial. He said he only talked to her and didn't touch her, but the polygraph revealed that was a lie. So they're like, why are you lying? And he was like, okay, I touched her body in February when she was laying on top of the snow. So this is 2 months after she disappeared, and Oregon had gotten 3 feet of snow in February alone. So there's no way she's still on top of the snow. I mean, we just got 9 inches of snow.
Hmm.
Imagine 3 feet, and he's
Yeah.
claiming her body's on top of it.
No.
So he admits to finding a decomposing body in the woods, touches the remains, and doesn't tell anyone. Even though he knew, like, he knows about the search for Kaye. He knows people are looking for her.
Mhm. Okay, and you're gonna say that, oh, I found these clothes and I wanted to come forward because I knew this family was searching for her. Oh, but I also found her body a while back, but I
Hmm.
didn't tell you about that. What? Like
Yeah.
these people are not stupid, John. Like, what are you doing?
Well,
Well, maybe they are. Maybe I'll tell you about it. We'll see.
Um, so he also like gives a lot of details about her body when he saw her like in February. Like he was saying her throat was slashed, there was a gunshot wound to the chest. Um, a lot of details that a lot of people think just by finding bones you wouldn't know, and that he clearly saw her earlier. And soon he also revealed that he wasn't alone. He's with Roger Dale Beck that day too. He was like, I was with my buddy too. Like both of us were there. So police interview Roger and his wife Pam, and Pam provided an alibi for Roger and John. She said John arrived at their house on Christmas Eve morning, and they did not go out that day at all, that they were home all day. So there's a lot of like circumstantial evidence pointing to John, but no physical evidence. And now with this supposed alibi, they just move on. Everyone believes he did it, but they never try to charge him or proceed with any of that. So, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So, back to 1990.
Okay. But
Not yet. Not yet. Okay.
there's no physical evidence, but the man literally had her fucking clothes.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm sorry, I'm listening.
Yeah. So, I guess they're thinking this supposed alibi
Ugh.
will be too much reasonable doubt to proceed. And again, these are like small town. I mean, Camp Sherman didn't even have a police force. So
Yeah.
who knows how much
Uh,
training the cops handling this even had? Not a
true.
lot, I can probably tell you that. But
Yeah.
the police don't get better in this story. I
Okay,
mean,
cool, 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 cool.
I guess a little bit at some point, but not in the 70s. Let's tell you
Mm,
that.
yeah.
So back to 1990 with Rachanda missing. John Aykroyd's interviewed by the police. John he said he went to work that day. He came home early, which appears isn't unusual. Like sometimes he would just come home kind of in the middle of the day. He talks to Rachanda, then leaves. He comes back and doesn't see her, but he also doesn't seem concerned. So John then starts telling the police on how she disappeared, that he was just like all over Linda and how they had sex. And he's like going into details. And he was saying it was like the best sex of their married life. This is on the evening, like they come home and Rachanda isn't there.
Gross. Like,
So,
what?
yeah. So he's like, you come home and your 13-year-old stepdaughter is missing. And you're talking to the police and you just start talking about the sex you had with your wife that night when your stepdaughter's missing.
Wow. Wow.
So, some of Rachanda's friends noticed some signs of abuse during her life when living with John Aykroyd. So, when Rachanda was 9 or 10, she started coming to school with signs of abuse. Like, she wasn't doing her hair, which was like always a big deal to her. Like, she'd always have her hair done. She was really anxious. She was not smiling as much and just seemed sad. A friend also remembers she'd come to school one day with a black eye and a cut underneath of it. Um, Two of her friends had abusive stepfathers, and one day, like they said, she told them like, "What's happening to you is happening to me." So she told them like, "He is abusing me." She said that John Aykroyd was coming into her room, like in the middle of the night. Byron remembers one night when he was 14 and Rachanda was 13. Linda was gone, so only Byron, John, and Rachanda were there. And Byron remembers waking up and finding John in Rachanda's bedroom and like kneeling on the side of her bed. And so Byron's like, "What's going on here?" And John's like, "Oh, she was having a nightmare. I just came in to like help her." But like, hindsight, we know what was happening.
Yeah.
One day, Rachanda did finally tell a trusted adult about what was happening to her, but her friends didn't never hear anything more. And one of those friends had actually told the same adult and was told they didn't believe they were telling the truth. So,
Mm.
yeah,
Ugh.
likely the same probably happened to Rachanda, where they told them and then they were just like, "Oh, there's not enough proof. We don't really think you're telling the truth," and didn't do
I'm so
anything.
sad.
Byron also spoke about the beatings and spankings they would get as children that he knew wasn't normal. Like he knew it was more excessive. And John had even like specially made a paddle that he would use to discipline Rashanda with. So a very, very abusive household. So John would also come up with these theories of what happened or who would do this. Like, oh, I bet they came in and took Rachanda and drove her down this road. Like he would come up with these like big theories and stories and what type of
Hmm.
person and all. The documentary has like a lot of his like police interview recordings, but it's just ramblings, honestly. Um, and Rachanda's cousin, Jennifer Pressinger, was with John a few months after Rachanda disappeared. And he like went down this like really secluded road and said, you could hide a body in here and nobody would ever find it. And she was like, yeah. And then he was like, do you need to go to the bathroom? Like, do you need to get out and go to the bathroom? And she was like, no. And she was like, I was about to pee myself, but something told me, like, do not get out of this truck. Like, I cannot. And
Yeah.
she was really scared. And she said she'd never been scared of John like that. Like previously in like the documentary, she was like, John to me was always like a safe person. Like he was never violent with me. He was never, besides his instance, like uncomfortable around me. She was like, there were a lot of men like that in my life, but John was not that person to me. So she was like, then this happens. And like, I get this feeling like if I get out of this truck, like he might do something to me. Um, there were also reports from people who knew John in school, and there was a story of him like setting a rabbit on fire, which is not great, but just wanted to
Not
include
great.
that in here.
Nope.
Yeah. So on the day of the search, a detective was teamed up with John, like the day they were searching for Rachanda. He said he kept making weird comments like about Rachanda's breast size and her period and what she was wearing. And he also kept referring to her in the past tense. And then he decided to change the subject. And that's when he starts talking about Kaye Turner, which is kind of odd. Like your missing stepdaughter, and then now you're going to bring up a crime from 12 years ago. I mean, maybe there is so little crime here that he's like, oh, this reminds me of this, but kind of weird.
Yeah, this other person that you were questioned in her murder. Oh,
That
okay.
everyone thinks you did. And now you're like,
Hmm.
I'm gonna bring this up
Yeah,
to
that's
the
a smart
detective.
thing to do.
Yeah. So they searched for Rachanda everywhere and they could not find her. There was blood on a rope found in John's truck, but Rachanda lived there. So there's multiple times she could have bled there. She could have gotten a nosebleed. She could have cut her finger. Like you can't pinpoint it to that exact day.
Hmm.
And at the time, they didn't have a body. And in that time, you couldn't really like try a case without a body. Like that's still something rarely done. And they really couldn't prove that she was actually dead. Like at this point, they were like, I mean, there is a chance she's kidnapped or run away somewhere. Um, but the searches stopped before school even started. However, the encounter with Kaye Turner was not the only strange encounter that John had before Rachanda's disappearance.
So John had a violent encounter with a stranger the year before Kay went missing. So Bill and Marlene Gabrielson went to the rodeo in Sisters, Oregon in 1977. So Marlene got all dressed up. They'd recently had a baby, so she was like ready to, dress up for a day out, like all that time of growing a human and birthing a human. You're
Mhm.
like, okay, I'm ready to like be
Breastfeeding a
myself again and
human,
like,
you're in your
right,
sweatpants, like you're like, I'm
right.
ready to look hot again.
Yes, like I want to go out and look nice. And she was also wearing a special pair of boots that her husband had bought for her. And so she started drinking some beers, and, it hit her rather fast, as it does when you've been pregnant, breastfeeding, whatever, and you haven't been drinking for a long period of time. And Bill ran into a few of his friends and they wanted to go to a bar and drink, but Marlene wouldn't be able to get in. So she was 19 and you had to be 21 in Oregon to go to a bar. And she was kind of upset because it was supposed to be their night out, but Bill hadn't seen these friends in a while and wanted to go with them. So Marlene was like, okay, that's fine. I'm going to go ahead and head home. And she was used to hitchhiking because we talked about before, like it was pretty common in those days, not really an unusual thing to do. So Marlene went to Highway 20, and the first ride she got was John Aykroyd. She did end up falling asleep, and she woke up and like felt her feet being dragged, and he was dragging her by her feet from the passenger side and was like hitting her head on the seats, the floor, the steps, just like literally dragging her out of this car. John then put a knife to her throat and said, "You're going to do everything I fucking tell you to do, aren't you?" And Marlene said that she would as long as he didn't hurt her. John then ripped her pants off and cut her boots off. John raped Marlene and said, "Now what do I do with you?" And Marlene asked him to take her home. She was just doing everything she could to get home to her baby, again, that she's left for probably the first time. She had John drop her off at Bill's mom's house, so they called the police and the police took a report, and then Marlene went to the hospital to do the rape kit. They then asked her to submit a polygraph test, which for your rape kit, you have to
Mm-hmm.
submit a polygraph test.
Mm-hmm.
And they asked her if she did drugs, how much did she drink, did she flirt with him?
Yeah. I told you the cops don't get better.
Like I like feel my face getting hot right now. Like just
Mm-hmm.
the fury that
Yeah.
okay. So John said that Marlene came on to him and he just submitted to her. And so the detective was like, "Yeah, that sounds about right." I just cannot believe this. Um, the detectives just made Marlene feel like small and like a liar, and they just clearly believed John over Marlene. And Marlene said to this day that she still has like trauma and nightmares about that night. She even accidentally gave her husband a black eye one night in her sleep. And Marlene said that she was just so scared that John was going to come back for her. She was always paranoid about making sure the doors were locked and that she was safe.
And yeah, it's just like something she's lived with and up to this day of like
Yeah.
that trauma. And like this is such like a minor part, but like the boots her husband bought her, she was like, my husband went without for a long time because we
Mm.
couldn't afford them and like I really wanted them and he bought them for me. And then like this happens where he just like cuts
And
them
cuts them
off and
off.
like it's a small part, but it's just like the trauma of like all of that and like I have to get home to my baby. Like I can't leave my baby motherless. Like what am
Yeah.
I gonna do? Like such a sad event and then how she was treated is like so horrible.
And the fact that you know exactly who did this to you. It's not even like, oh, this was a
Mm-hmm.
stranger that I don't know, the police can't find out, the police can't catch him. Like, I know who it is. I told you who it was. He admitted that we had sex, but he claimed that I came on to him. And they're just like, yeah, yeah, we
Yeah.
believe it.
Yeah.
Ugh. So after Rachanda went missing, a lot of the women in Santiam Junction pressured the state to relocate him. So there's now at least like three instances of him being violent with women. They're like, can we please get this guy out of here? And there were a lot of women alone with like one phone for all of the houses. Because again, this is a very, small area. It's not like everyone has their own way to reach someone. Like they're all like sharing
Mm-hmm.
this phone line. So they're like, we don't feel safe here." So in 1990, they transferred him to Corvallis Highway Department. So Corvallis is where Oregon State University is located. So not really a great spot for someone accused of hurting three women so far. Like that's a great place to send
Just put
him.
him right where there's
Yeah,
hundreds of young college girls.
all the young college girls. That's the place we want to send this rapist to, of course. So they moved him here, claiming that it's so police could monitor him. But John was like a roving field mechanic, so he could be driving upwards of 130 miles a day. So it's like he's all over the place. Like, what do you mean you're going to
Mm-hmm.
monitor him? Like, he's literally
Yeah,
everywhere.
like
There's no way to
he works for
monitor
the
him.
highway department. Like his whole job is to drive around and like
Yeah,
help people on the road or clear something off the road. Like that's his whole job is driving. So like how are
yeah,
you monitoring him by just moving him somewhere? Like give him a desk job.
exactly. So Lebanon is a small town, about 25 minutes from Corvallis and about 20 minutes from Sweet Home. So the local hangout was at Sherry's on Highway 20. And in the local cars, they all had CB radio, so they could just like talk to one another. And they all had different handles like Bunny, Lady Know-It-All, Night Rider, fun stuff like that. And in 1992, John eventually started coming around and he made his CB radio handle the Pervert.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So everyone thought this was kind of odd, because it is. And he really only talked to Melissa Sanders and Sheila Swanson. So they were young, they were best friends. Melissa loved to have fun and would like bounce around. So Melissa was very like tough talking and independent. And Sheila carried around her baby book to like remind her of when she was happier. She also often wore a black leather jacket. So Melissa and Sheila were a little rebellious, like we all are as teenage girls. And they had met around December of 1991, and they didn't really have the best upbringing. So they're usually trying to like find a way to get food or like even go to someone else's house for a shower. And Sheila spent frequent time away from her house, and it seemed like Melissa may have had an abusive upbringing as well. They both had dropped out of high school, and John became very obsessed with Melissa and eventually kind of possessive. But he never bought anything for Sheila, only Melissa. And he was like always trying to touch her, but Melissa viewed John as like an older figure, like a father figure, someone to look out for her. But clearly, John was trying to groom her.
Mm-hmm.
And in May of 1992, Melissa was excited because she was taking a camping trip with her family for a family reunion, and she was able to take Sheila with her. So John was around when they were talking about it and started asking like where they were going camping. She said she wasn't sure, but it was somewhere near Newport. And now all of a sudden, John says he's throwing a party in Newport on Saturday night. So what a coincidence.
Crazy.
Wow. So Melissa and Sheila were supposed to spend the whole weekend at the campsite, but they wanted to try to leave to go to this party. And eventually, Melissa and Sheila just didn't end up showing back up. They thought maybe they had gotten a ride with friends and left. However, Melissa's family got concerned when they went back to Sweet Home and she wasn't there. Her father waited a few more days and then called police. Police also spoke with Sheila's mom in Lebanon, who said that she hadn't heard from her. She had been hanging up missing posters, but hadn't called the police yet.
Because it
So
was
they,
kind of common for them to like not come home, but like
yeah,
not to like not call, kind of. But like that's why they kind of didn't report it to the police immediately. I don't want people to be like, what in the world? Why wouldn't you do that? And I'm like, but also they were camping and woke up and they were gone and they were like, sounds about right. They just left because they didn't want to be here anymore. Like
yeah.
kind of thing.
And like we said, like it's very typical kind of how they were anyway. Like they were always like, oh, let
Mm-hmm.
me go to this person's house, like never really home and just kind
Yeah.
of bouncing around all over the place anyway. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So they officially went missing on May 3rd. Like we said, not unusual for them to like go somewhere, but was kind of odd for them to like not call or check in. Their parents did call the police repeatedly, but they just kept putting them on the back burner. So now we have the opposite of, oh, well, why are you calling already?
Mm-hmm.
It's just a runaway.
Yeah.
Um, but unfortunately, they did find their bodies in October of 1992. So at the crime scene, Sheila and Melissa were found about 50 feet off of Hayes Creek Road. Sheila's ankles were bound with leggings. Her sneakers and socks were still on her feet. Part of Melissa's body was missing, but she was found nude. They're not sure how they died, but there were areas that appeared to possibly be stab wounds on their body. And near Sheila's body, they also found a piece of rivet, which is like a mechanical fastener, not really something that Melissa or Sheila would typically have, but would be something that a mechanic might have. And remember, John is a mechanic. They also found a beaded seat cushion, which was something almost all of the Oregon Department of Transportation coworkers had, and it was also missing out of John's truck when it was searched.
Yeah.
So around the time of Rachanda going missing, detectives decide to start looking more into Kaye Turner's murder. So again, John's alibi for Kaye Turner was Pam. Pam had divorced Roger and moved to California, so they decided to go see her. And of course, now she says that she lied about her alibi, to no one's surprise.
Yeah. The detective was like, I showed up to the door and she was like, I was wondering when you would come. I lied. Like basically being like, I was waiting for you to come. Like,
Like, okay, so why didn't you reach out, Pam? Like, I mean, you shouldn't have lied in the first place, but at this point, you divorced, like
yeah,
you lied for your husband. Okay, whatever. You divorced your husband, you've moved out of state. Why didn't you come forward before this point? Why are you waiting for them to come to you?
yeah. I mean, maybe she just doesn't trust the police.
Goodness.
I mean,
Yeah.
they're
Um,
not giving her much reason to trust them in
that is
general.
true. That is true. So Pam said at the time of Kay's disappearance that Roger and John had come in like with blood on them and they made statements to her about accidentally killing a jogger. I'm sorry, what?
Yeah.
So before this, Roger Beck was not a suspect, but now they're looking at possibly two defendants. So Roger Beck also, in this time, had been convicted of a sex crime in Minnesota and served 7 months in prison. So with newer technology, they decided to try and send Kay's clothes that were found for testing. The lab found that the tears in her shirt were from a stab wound, and they also found lead fragments on her shirt that were determined to be from bullet holes. So John then started doing media interviews about finding the body, and he gave pretty detailed descriptions, but they were able to find a forensic anthropologist to say that to know in that detail, he would have had to have seen her within 2 or 3 days of her murder. So he's claiming like to find her once it was most skeletal remains, and they're like, no, that's not how it would have been.
Yeah, like if
Um,
he knew this many details about stabbing and gunshots, which are then corroborated with the forensics testing,
mhm.
like he would have had to have seen her a few, like within a few days
Yeah,
of her murder and not when they found skeletal remains.
exactly. Like you saw more of her body than just the skeleton months later, as you claim. He also claimed in the interview that police knew Roger Beck killed her. And he said he didn't really know Roger, just like a friend of a friend, which is a lie because they had been best friends since high school.
Yeah. He's just like
So,
going to the media being like, I don't know who this. He was like, I think his name's Roger. I think they said his last name's Beck. And it's like, he's your best friend. Why are
oh
you
my
pretending like
God.
you don't know him?
Good Lord. So, John Aykroyd and Roger Beck were charged with kidnapping, raping, and murdering Kaye Turner in June of 1992. In October of 1993, John went to trial, but he did not testify. Another woman testified there as well, and she said that she had a brush with John a few months prior to Kay's murder. So Jane Morris was 24 years old at the time. She was on her bike and heading home from a waitressing job when she noticed John standing near his pickup truck along the side of the road in Camp Sherman. He pointed a handgun at her and ordered her to stop. Jane crouched and rushed past him and rode towards the local country store. So the media interview was a really damning piece of evidence to show that this man is obviously a liar. Um,
Yeah. It just kind of shows like who he is. Like,
yeah.
yeah.
So John Aykroyd was found guilty of killing Kay Turner. Roger Beck would have his trial in April of 1994, and he would eventually be convicted as well, and he received a life sentence. So in 2012, there was a chance that John could get paroled. So they decided to go to talk to him to see if he'll talk about what happened to Rachanda. However, John said he never killed Rachanda or Kay Turner, and he's innocent. He said he's never killed anyone else in his life. So in 2013, they decided to try and charge John with Rachanda's murder. And John cut a deal with Lynn County authorities to enter a no contest plea for Rachanda's death, and in exchange, he would give up on parole. So the judge accepted the plea and then sealed the record, which was very odd. So he would now spend the rest of his life in prison. However, he never revealed where Rachanda was, which is just like,
Yeah.
I don't want to
Really
talk on my
sad.
ass because I may talk about something in a second that I don't know is coming, but it's like you kind of get closure, but not really. Because it's
Yeah.
like he pleaded no contest and he's like, okay, like I'm not going to go through all that trial, but like I'll just stay in prison forever and not try to get parole. Like you're admitting that you did it, but you're not admitting that you did it and you're not revealing where she is so that her family can bury her.
Yeah, and it's super weird too because like in the documentary they were like we asked a lot of like Oregon lawyers like is it common to then seal a record? Because sealing a record means it is not public record. People cannot go and
Yeah,
look at it. That means
that's
like
very weird.
nobody can. And they're like we've never heard this ever happen. So it's like why like all she got was like a no contest plea and then sealed the record. So like no one even really if you look up his record, it won't even really come up.
That's so
It's
weird.
weird.
Yeah. So Melissa and Sheila's cases were reopened in 2012 to try and find out what happened to them. So, around the time of their disappearance, one of the ODOT workers was working late and heard a loud noise. So, he went outside and saw John getting out of his truck, and John's arms from his fingers to his elbows were covered in dried blood. Both of his arms. So, the ODOT worker first asked if he was okay and thought that, like, it seemed like too much blood to be his because you're standing, you're acting normal, and you're literally covered in blood.
Yeah, he's
Um,
first like, "Are you okay?" And then he's like, that doesn't seem like your blood."
is everyone else okay? Yeah.
Yeah.
So John said he was coming back from Newport and some guy had hit a deer and he helped him like salvage some of the meat. So the coworker didn't really think anything of it until John was arrested for Kay's murder. So the task force is forming a good circumstantial case. They thought since John was serving a life sentence, it would be too expensive to prosecute him for Melissa and Sheila's murders. Then, John died in the Oregon State Penitentiary at the age of 67 on December 30th, 2016. His cause of death was heart disease, and apparently the state had to continue to pay out his pension of $3,624 a month so he would be able to stock his cell with junk food, processed meats and cheeses, and candy bars. and he just didn't really leave his cell much. So this
Which I
man's like,
really hope Oregon passed some law after this where it's like, I don't have to keep paying you your retirement pension when
if
you're
you're
a
in
convicted
prison for
murderer.
life,
A
like what?
convicted murderer.
That's
Hopefully
crazy.
they figured out how to fix that after
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, hopefully they wrote that into law. Like, we can't have this happen again." So there were clusters of disappearances in the 1970s along Highway 20. So John started working as an ODOT worker in 1978, and there's no telling how many women he came across, like maybe stranded, like you're supposed to be someone coming along to help them, like someone they can trust. And again, it's
Hmm.
the 70s. It's not like people have like very accurate like records of where they're at all times. It's not like someone could easily see where you last
Yeah,
were or
it's like the same
something.
thing. Like you're broken down the side of the road and you see like a police car show up and you're like, oh,
Yeah, thank
thank
goodness.
goodness,
Yeah.
because this person will help me. And it's like, but you also don't know this is the worst person in the world, basically.
Exactly. And it's impossible to know how many more women he attacked and killed. There are a few unidentified women who were found along the highway. So one set of skeletal remains is known as Swamp Mountain Doe. She was under 30 years old, but that's all they really know. And about 10 miles from that is where they found Snow Creek Doe, which is another set of skeletal remains. Around this area as well is where Elizabeth Musler was found at Thistle Creek Boat Ramp. So Elizabeth lived in the Jolly Roger apartments on Highway 20, and John's younger sister also lived in the same apartment complex. So Elizabeth Musler was last seen waiting in the parking lot for her dad to pick her up for an eye appointment, and then she was never seen again. Another few miles away, Karen Lee, who was 14 years old, and Rodney Grissom, who was 15 years old, were found. They had last been seen near Lebanon and were believed to have possibly run away. They were believed to be trying to make it to California. Karen Lee was talking on a payphone in Lebanon and said, "I gotta go, my ride's here." And the logging crew found clothing in 1978 that belonged to Karen. Karen's mother, Violet Gilmore, believes that John Aykroyd is the one who killed Karen and Rodney. They disappeared just a year before Kaye Turner's murder. 4 years later, about a quarter of a mile away, Rodney's clothing and some other articles were found, and all of these victims or their belongings were found near Highway 20, where John would have worked, lived, hunted, fished, just generally been. And he knew these areas
Hmm.
very well, so it is very possible these cases are associated with him. And that is the horrible murders of these women along Highway 20.
Yeah. As far as we know for sure, Rachanda Pickle, Kaye Turner, Melissa Sanders, and Sheila Swanson, in addition to, you know, Elizabeth Musler, Karen Lee, Rodney Grisham, Swamp Mountain Doe, Snow Creek Doe, also with Marlene, who
Hmm.
was a surviving victim of him, and who knows how many other like surviving victims, and also just how many other victims that just haven't been found.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like, especially in that kind of situation where you come across somebody who's on the side of the road who could be someone who has run away and that was their intention. So
Hmm.
people they weren't really concerned like when that person never came back because maybe you are headed to California or somewhere else.
Like Karen and Rodney, like they were like, we're
Yeah,
going to California, we're running away, like we're getting there. I mean,
exactly.
even though they were runaways, though, like people still knew where they were trying to go. Like,
Yeah.
but yeah.
Just so sad and just like what a horrible human being, but what a dumb human being who's just like all over the news like talking about these murders that we know that he committed. Like
Yeah, just on the news
ugh.
talking about it, pretending not to know his high school best friend, just getting so bold to murder his stepdaughter
Yeah.
in his like someone who lived in his own household. Like he's clearly escalating. He was clearly like just getting way too comfortable with
Hmm.
getting away with murder. And like a lot of people say how sad it was that like he killed Sheila and Melissa. I mean, I'm convinced he was responsible for them, like
Yeah.
in May 1992. And then they weren't able to like arrest him until like June 1992. And they're like, how many people could have been saved if he was arrested
Exactly.
back in 1978? And how many people could have been saved if like they were able to get it together quicker? Because like even in the documentary, like once Rachanda went missing, they were like, okay, let's try to make sure we have like all the Kaye Turner documents and the Rachanda Pickle documents together. And he was like, they were just everywhere. Like every different law enforcement department had something
Mm,
that they just weren't sharing with each other. Like it was just all over the place. So
yeah.
just so sad.
Which I get, like, if there's no evidence, like, you can't arrest someone, but like, he brought you her clothes and was like, oh, I just, like,
Hmm.
was clearly lying about it. Like, oh, I just found them laying here in the woods when they would have been here for 8 months and there's no disturbances, nothing's on top of them, they haven't been moved. Like, I
Yeah. And
don't
just
know.
poor Noel, who was like treated as a suspect for so
Yeah.
long and then had to find out like his missing wife was also like cheating on him. Like,
Yeah.
just so much trauma there. And like, Byron was absolutely heartbreaking in the documentary where he's like, I was supposed to protect her. Like, she was my sister. Like, we were supposed to be there for
Mhm.
each other. And like, even to this day, like, can't get, like, he doesn't know where she is.
Yeah. And was there evidence that was missed for John because they were focused on Noel as the murderer? And they're like, oh, like this guy
Mm-hmm.
did it. Like we're just pursuing him, trying to get him to confess. And we're ignoring anything that doesn't fit this little pretty package.
Mm-hmm.
And did you miss something that you could have used to
And
convict
like when
John at
you were
that time?
interviewing him, you were like, oh, he's just a witness. He just saw
Yeah.
her running, not maybe we should ask a little bit deeper because you're too busy probably being like, Noel did it. Like
Yeah,
the husband did
exactly.
it. The husband brought her on this romantic weekend just to kill her. Oh,
So
yeah.
sad. Okay, well, time for
Now that we're all
our,
depressed.
yeah, our awkward transition. Courtney, what is your perk of the week?
So my perk of the week is that this week I battled the snow and ice storm to make my way downtown to go see Wicked. And it was
Yes.
so good. It was
Ugh,
so, so good. Oh,
good.
it was incredible. And it was my Christmas present to my mom and my sister. And unfortunately, my sister could not leave her house.
Oh,
Her whole neighborhood
that's
was a sheet of
sad.
ice, but she
Hmm.
also has like two kids and two dogs that was then like, well, if we get her out, then what
Then
do we
what?
do with the rest of her household?
Yeah, that's
Those,
true.
you can't, even if you got the kids somewhere, you couldn't really leave the dogs. Like it was
Hmm.
just a mess. And like my parents went over that day and it was like ice like
Yeah.
everywhere. So basically I asked my dad, I was like, Dad, do you want to go see Wicked? And he was like, sure. Like I'm driving your mom downtown anyway, might as well. And he really enjoyed it too. So that was
Oh,
fun. Like he didn't know
good.
anything about Wicked. Like he didn't
Yeah.
know anything. I was like, have you heard Defying Gravity? And he was like, I don't know.
That's so funny.
And then he said later, like it kind of like he was like the tune sounded familiar, but
Yeah.
he really enjoyed it too and was like talking about it.
Good.
So that was fun to get out and get to go with my parents and go see Wicked. And I was really scared that I wasn't going to be able to make it, but thankfully
Yeah.
it proceeded on.
Was the audience pretty packed or was it more
Oh
empty
yeah,
because of
it was sold.
everyone
It
else was like,
everyone.
we will get here.
Well, because
We
yeah,
will walk here.
basically, I mean, everyone, it's a traveling cruise, so they're all staying downtown
Hmm.
and they have like they can't because everyone's like, why don't you just reschedule it? And I'm like, because they got to be in a different city in like 2 days
Exactly.
after
Like there's
this.
no rescheduling.
And there's also like contracts, like with Hamilton last year, it was like, we will not come unless you make us this amount of money,
Mm,
basically.
yeah.
So that's kind of how it was with this, where it's like you can't just cancel it. And then people were selling their tickets for an absurd amount of money.
Yeah.
Absurd. And I'm like, you're saying you can't go and you're trying to sell your ticket for $400? Like, are you insane?
Like maybe just try to make
Anyway,
your money back and not.
because that's what I was gonna do. Because like Kevin was not interested. Kevin
Hmm.
musicals are not Kevin's thing. He's like,
Hmm.
please don't make me. So if my dad didn't want to go, I was just gonna be like, I'm selling it for like what I paid for it,
Yeah.
or whatever you'll get me for it at this point,
Yeah. We're like,
just
I'm
to
just
make
trying to
money
break
back.
even,
Like,
try to get something.
yeah. So, but it was really good and it was really fun and
Good.
nice to go see it with my parents. So we didn't fall. We made it,
Well, I'm
but
very glad you were still able to make it because I know you were looking forward to that, and that would have sucked if you weren't
yeah.
able to go because of the weather.
Yeah, I would have walked my butt down there by
Hey, at
myself, I
least you
guess.
live close enough that you could have walked
Yeah,
there.
that's the benefit is I could like
Yeah.
and like when my parents picked me up, like I wouldn't let them come down my road because it's like
Hmm.
it's still kind of icy out there.
Yeah,
So,
definitely.
but yeah, so that is my perk of the week. Jacqueline, what is your perk of the week?
So my perk of the week, since I've literally been in my house this entire week, haven't really gone anywhere or done anything. It has been a pain in the ass, but my perk of the week does have to be the snow because it was nice those first couple of days, kind of got
Hmm.
over it. Glad we don't have to deal with this
We
on a
like the
regular
snow. We just
basis.
didn't like the ice.
Exactly. Like if I could just be snow, but I could also leave my house, perfect. Beautiful. Love it. But no, it was very nice to actually get to see more snow than I've ever seen in my entire life. And my daughter just
Hmm.
had so much fun. Like she loves it. She got to make a snow angel, which was really funny because she is struggling with like moving her arms and legs at the same time. So she like goes back and forth. She like does her arms and then her legs and then her arms and like, no, you gotta
Can't
do
do them at the
both.
same time.
Yeah. It's really funny to watch her try. But she loved that. And, of course, we had to have snowball fights and just all the fun stuff. And it was funny, the very first day I told her, like, thankfully, we were already off work that day. Because, we work from home. So now you don't get snow days. You just got to work in the snow. Um,
Hmm.
but we were off for Martin Luther King Jr. Day. And so we got to go play in the snow like that morning. And we came inside and had hot chocolate. And I was like, Millie, like, every time we have a snow day, we'll come in and have hot chocolate. Well, now girlfriend thinks because there's snow on the ground, she gets hot chocolate every day. And I was like, okay, I didn't think this through because I'm not used to there
Yeah.
being a snow day for 8 days in a row.
Well,
But we
don't
got a lot of
worry. It
hot
is
chocolate.
supposed to get up into the 60s this week and
That's
rain.
true.
So
Yeah.
we had negative temperatures last week, and now we're going to be in the 60s.
And
So
now we're probably going to have flash flooding because we're going to have all this rain on top of
that's
all this
what
melting
I know. That's
snow.
what my boss said. He was like,
Yeah.
now time for the flash floods.
Yep.
So,
It's a great time down here in Tennessee. But
oh, we're having so much fun.
yes, if you guys want to tell us about what your weather is doing, did you get to see Wicked this year or something else really cool this year? What do you think about this case? All the good stuff. We're in the show notes. You know where to find us. Again, if you want to be like Julie and come join us over on Patreon, that's patreon.com/caffeinated crimes. Not going to go into the whole spiel again. Already did. Courtney, take it away.
And if you'll please be sure to give us 5 stars on Spotify or Apple, if you can like and subscribe on all those platforms and on YouTube and leave nice comments. But in the meantime, go have a cup of coffee.
And don't commit a crime.